Hello and welcome to another episode of the Allo and Ace podcast. I am the allosexual Skylar.
And I'm the asexual. My name is Jessie.
Hello, Jessie.
Hi, Skylar.
All right. Before we start this episode, we do want to give a few warnings and some information. The first thing is just a trigger warning that this podcast does discuss sexuality, and it could include trauma, suicide, self-harm in other forms, as well as sex.
Yeah, so make sure you are aware of where you're at with your mental health. And if you're having a hard time getting through the episode, please do what you need to do to take a break.
Yep. And another thing is that we understand that asexuality is a diverse umbrella, and we can only speak to our own experiences.
Yes, and we're always willing to learn about things that we didn't know before. So please, this is our ask to have you reach out to us if we do get something wrong or if it seems like we might not know something.
And this podcast in particular is mostly discussing the relationship that I myself have with my spouse, which our dynamic is a allosexual and asexual relationship.
Right. And with that, I just want to say that I do use the she and her pronouns. I consider myself panromantic. And I also consider myself an asexual that is averse to sex. And
I am a he, him. I am heterosexual, allosexual. The final bit of advice, or if you will, is that we are not professionals. This is merely our living experience and our own opinions. We obviously recommend seeking a safe therapist if you are needing to get that professional help.
Yes. And I mean, we have thought about going to school together, but we have not done that.
That is true.
That is true.
We have had amazing support for the podcast thus far, and you can find us on most socials as Allo and Ace, all one word, including Tumblr, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and then you can find us as allo.and.ace on TikTok. And if you want to email us, you can do so at alloandacepodcast@gmail.com.
If you send us a direct message through any of those platforms, we do try to keep on top of that and give you a response.
And please follow on all of them if you can. So that would be awesome. And I believe we will possibly start doing some YouTube videos as well, but we don't have a date on that yet.
Right.
So let's get into the episode.
Let's do it.
All right. So we've had and have seen a lot of questions out there when it comes to the fear or the reality of there being a lack of something within the relationship. And in this case, it's typically related to intimacy, specifically sexual intimacy.
And also a lack of sexual desire towards a person.
So you have the allosexual, typically, who is saying that there is a lack of sexual response or sexual desire from their asexual partner. And at the same time, there is a fear on the side of the asexual or a lack of feeling like their touch is enough.
Right. Yep. I would agree with that.
And so we want to talk about intimacy and touch and what that looks like, not only in a allo-allo relationship and why that might be different in an asexual allo relationship. There's a quote that I shared on, I think, most of the socials today, which said, "Intimacy with expectancy oftentimes leads to disappointment." And so a lot of these relationships, they sometimes will start off in a sexual manner. And like we discussed in the second episode, Jessie herself had this sexual persona, which she used in the first part of our marriage.
Yes, I used unknowingly.
It wasn't intentional. And after a while, there was a discrepancy, if you will, on maybe the amount of encounters, or the expectancy was still there, even though the result wasn't the same.
Right. But that those encounters went down pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I know I described this as when we first got together, it was like I felt like I could trust someone and was getting all of these buckets filled for the first time in a long, long, long time. And so I just wanted to be as close to you as I possibly could. And I think we all know what I mean when I say that. And so once I knew that it was filled up, my cup was filled and I felt safe. It was, I don't know, what do you think? Maybe just like half of a year in?
Probably.
Yeah, it wasn't long at all.
And a lot of the people that are listening to our podcast, they have been in relationships for quite a while. Some are new, but there has been this discrepancy or this lack on both sides for quite a while. And then their partner figures out, I'm asexual, lets them know. And now there's this fear of, okay, so it's not getting better.
Right.
And so what do you do? The issue with this, though, is that there's still an expectancy. Because one person is looking for the other person to, I don't know, fix themselves somehow and not be asexual.
Which I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that's not going to happen.
And so they then say, well, what compromises can we make? And again, depending on the asexual partner or the partner who is lacking, which I don't like to even use that word.
Yeah, it's a hard word to hear.
But we're using the language that we hear.
Yeah.
So you have one partner saying there's a lack, right? And the issue is that when there is that expectancy in intimacy and there's that disappointment, it causes two things to happen. One, it's going to cause the person who's feeling that there is a lack and that they aren't happy with the touch or intimacy that they are getting, they are going to start having resentment and anger towards their partner. And that's going to cause them to pull away in other ways, on an emotional level, on any other type of touch level. And the second thing that's going to happen is that the person who is lacking, or in this case, the asexual partner, is going to feel like what, Jessie?
They're going to feel like anything they do is never going to be enough.
So, story time.
Oh, story time. Sorry, Skylar. This one's going to be hard on you.
Yes. So,
I'm like, where do we even start here?
So it got to a point probably 4 years ago, I would say, where I would make these comments and Jessie would feel bad and she would try to do stuff here and there. And it got to a point where I was getting frustrated because I had that expectancy.
Right. And just to be clear here, I am a very affectionate person. I'm very touchy. I love cuddling. I love holding hands. I love giving kisses. I'm not the biggest fan of just like making out for a while.
Yeah.
But I'm very lovey. And so you have me just giving everything I know how to give. And then you have Skylar that's maybe making some comments here and there. And one Oh, one comment in particular was really hard for me. I brought that one up quite a bit for a while.
Yes. And I will say I am not proud of
No.
the things that I have said.
Are you a little... Are you feeling some shame right now?
I am feeling ashamed of it. I'm not nervous because I own and accept. And the whole part of this podcast is to show vulnerability and acceptance.
It's true. And we've all made mistakes. We can say that.
This was a shit comment.
This was a shit comment. And honestly, I'm a little nervous to even say it because I'm scared that it will actually feed other allosexuals and being like, well, it is like that. You know what I mean? But
we will get to that.
We will. So let's get to the comment. We're all on pins and needles here.
So for instance, if Jesse was willing to give me a handy, for instance,
or something orally,
it got to the, and again, it wasn't happening a lot, but when it would happen, I was like, if this isn't going to like lead to sex, then just don't bother. Because what? Because
this is what he said to me. He looked at me and he said, that's like taking me to Disneyland and parking in the parking lot, but never going in. And I was like, wow, okay. Okay, well, since it's so much less then, I am so sorry. Wow. Well, I'm pretty sure I don't ever want to do that again because, gosh, not going into the park. Jeez. We're sitting here laughing because, honestly, here's the thing. Like,
but hold on. I actually tried to like backpedal too. I'm like, but you get to see the pretty rides. So actually,
yes,
like,
you did.
Being in the parking lot's not that bad. Actually,
it's not that bad. It's not that bad to sit in the Disneyland parking lot looking at the rides.
Oh, I'm such an asshole.
It was so bad, and I'm sassy. I'm going to be honest. Like
she's a redhead. She's an Aries. She be spicy.
Guys, I do have my spicy moments. I'd like to think that I get spicy only when I feel very strongly about something, though. In a general sense, though, I am pretty composed.
Yeah.
But also, like, here's the other thing. We're talking about serious things on this podcast.
Yes.
And we are the biggest goofballs, honestly. We're dorks.
This might actually be the only time that Jesse really ever sees me serious.
That's true. So anyway, let's get back to the story here. It was a strong hit. It was bad.
We can laugh about it now, but I highly don't recommend you using that analogy or any analogy really, and for that matter, to discuss the lack of intimacy.
No, because guess what? Every time after that I even had this little feeling of doing something like that for him, I would think, don't want to take him to the parking lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that wasn't good. So when this would happen, when little comments like this would be made, I would have a definite spiraling moment. I would start off by being so pissed and angry, and then I would feel so bad. I would feel like I am failing. I will do anything I can, please. Like, I'm trying so hard. I just want to be more sexual for you. I don't know what's wrong with me. Let me read another book. Let me go find a book that teaches me how to just be so fucking sexual. Sorry, excuse my language.
And obviously this was during her persona days. Like, this was, 4 to 2 years ago, or 2 to 4 years ago, rather.
Right. So it just didn't make any sense to me. It's like not up there in my head at all. But if I did finally wrap my head around it and we did stuff, then I would be like, into it. I would make sure I was into it.
And the one thing that's always been good about our relationship is that we both started off, this is our second marriages like we discussed, and we both started off saying that we weren't going to put our best foot forward.
No, and I think a lot of people enter into dating trying to be their best selves. Like, I think that's very common. And Skylar and I looked at each other and we said, nah, let's just really put it all out on the line. We will do whatever. We will be ridiculous in front of each other. We will fart in front of each other. We will do whatever.
Because I didn't want to get a year into the marriage and then realize that Jessie wasn't who I thought she was, which, I guess
in some ways
that
I didn't even know who I was, I guess, either.
Yeah. But I also didn't want her to, a year down the road, be like, Skylar, you were like this kind, romantic person. What happened?
Yeah, you were so mellow and now you're just so loud.
And so we started off our relationship with that. And then also when Jessie would confront me with these things that hurt her feelings, I didn't say, well, that sounds like a you problem. I would say, part of me would fight it to a degree because I'd be like, that's not what I meant. Or maybe I could have chosen a different analogy or whatever, but the intention was still there. And so I would ultimately be like, I'm sorry that made you feel that way. I will try to do better not to hurt your feelings. Please let me know whenever that happens.
Right. And I'm someone that has always, if something has hurt my feelings or bothered me, I do not let it sit. I will say it almost right away and say, hey, that really hurt my feelings. We need to talk about this. And I think that has helped us, especially through all of this stuff, because anything that's come up, it's been addressed almost immediately.
So getting back into what that looks like in a relationship, if you as a allosexual are using language and using terminology and using words like there's a lack of this or a lack of that, and you're pulling away from your partner, and the only touch that you ever want to give them is sexual, that's going to be an issue.
Yeah, they won't trust any of your touches if that's what's going on. But what's interesting is it goes the other way too.
Mm-hmm.
So you can have the asexual person trying to give you really lovey touches, but it doesn't lead to anywhere. And so it just is this cycle.
Well, but how does it feel as an asexual knowing that every time you touch me, I'm hoping that it leads to sex?
Well, eventually you just don't want to touch at all. You just
Exactly.
don't even want to because you're too freaked out to let them down.
So I think that a way to get past this potentially, and I'm not saying that everyone can get past this, but I can talk about how maybe I got past it.
I think that's a good idea.
And
wait. All of the allos in the room listening are like, do tell.
Do tell.
Do tell.
What did you give her to make her more sexual?
I don't know if it's going to be the answers y'all want.
Now, we understand that this isn't going to help everybody. There are some relationships that are in such a negative space right now when it comes to this that it might take a lot of work. But I think that the hope is that you can take some of this information and it'll open a dialogue, or at least it'll open up that communication with your partner to hopefully at least have some positivity in your relationship when it comes to intimacy.
Right. What we're asking before we get into this deeper is that those listening are listening with a curious mind and open to seeing what could happen here.
Now, the one thing that we need to establish is what is intimacy.
Yes, yep.
And I probably say that word weird, and that's okay.
Intimacy?
Intimacy.
Intimacy.
I'm like, intimacy.
Intimacy.
So, if you asked your partner, as an allosexual, if you asked your asexual partner, what does intimacy look like to you? I guarantee that it probably is not the same thing that you would answer if they asked you the same question.
Okay, let's play a little game here.
Okay.
Let's go back
3.5 years ago?
3.5 years. We're going to act like you're asking me that. Okay.
Hey, Jesse, what does intimacy look like to you?
Intimacy? Oh, I love intimacy. Intimacy looks like the way we cuddle every single night and the way that I put my leg over your leg in bed and the way that we hold hands. Oh, and the way that we say goodbye or hello and we give each other 3 kisses. That's definitely intimacy. Now you have me saying intimacy weird. I love the way that we cook food in the kitchen together. It's like a dance. It feels really intimate to me.
And then what was my response actually?
Yeah, how do you feel about intimacy? What's intimacy to you, Skylar?
That's not the same thing as sex.
But I show you a lot of intimacy. I do this and this and this. I do all these things. They're very intimate.
But they're not. That's not intimate. That's like regular.
That's what friends do.
That's what friends. Well, I don't know that you should kiss your friends, but
no, but
maybe you should.
You definitely have said that. You had said that before.
Yeah. So
this is what makes us different. That's what you would say.
This is what makes us not roommates.
Yes. Oh, the roommate comment. Ooh.
Yeah, not proud of that. So the issue with that is we never had that conversation really. So what Jesse thought intimacy was and what I thought intimacy was not the same thing.
Wildly different.
And so how are we supposed to be intimate together when the very definition that we each have for it is different?
Right. But also pointing out the fact that I'm not giving anyone else this intimacy. And so it feels so special to me that I am doing that for Skylar, with Skylar, for us.
So then how do you distinguish the difference between intimacy as all the things that Jesse listed versus the act of sex?
Well, I think that all the things that I listed are non-sexual.
It's true. They aren't. But can I get on board and acknowledge that those are intimate things? And that's what an allosexual needs to look at, is how they are defining being intimate with their partner.
Right. If you are only looking at sex as the way to be intimate, you are missing out on so many other ways of intimacy that bring you and your partner closer.
And the issue also is that your partner has to trust that the touch that you're doing is enough. That there's no expectation or getting behaviors associated with that touch.
Exactly.
And so there is a second quote that I shared today, which I think is amazing. And it says that respect is the bridge between healthy boundaries and meaningful connections. So what does that look like? It looks like the person who has the most boundaries, meaning I as a allosexual, heterosexual, very sexual person might have less boundaries than my asexual partner. Even in an allo-allo relationship, there's going to be sexual boundaries. Because if your partner or yourself doesn't want to do something, then that's going to be a healthy boundary for you to maintain.
Yes, this is what's great about this is that it's across the board.
And so when it comes to the person that's quote unquote lacking, the person that has more boundaries, it is highly important that they set those healthy boundaries so that they can feel safe. And if you respect that, then that respect will be the bridge that takes their healthy boundaries and leads to that connection with them that is meaningful.
Right.
And so let's look at what that looks like in our marriage today.
Yeah. So if we go back a couple years, I would not say that it looked like this.
Actually, let's go back a couple years.
Okay.
there were things that I would do that were not respecting of your boundaries.
Yeah. Tell us about them, Skylar.
Well, let's go actually way, way back.
Oh, way back.
There were, and this is universal as well. There are many people that understand what I'm about to say.
Okay. I'm nervous, but let's go.
If your hand was near my crotch, I would sometimes move it onto my crotch.
Oh, yeah. Man, I blocked that one out. That's true. And didn't I say, why are you doing that?
Yes.
Why are you doing that? Did I say I wanted to put my hand on your penis?
If I want to touch you,
I will
touch you. If I'm not trying to touch you, I don't want to touch you.
I'm not trying to touch you.
Yeah, so that was a very unhealthy boundary that I didn't have with you. And to be fair, we didn't have a lot of these conversations until something would happen.
Right. Gosh, that sounds so bad, Skylar. I'm gonna be honest with you. I have honestly not thought of how that was happening. But the other thing about this is that my persona that I had, I don't know, sometimes I'd be sassy with it.
Yeah.
But sometimes it'd be like, no, don't do that.
Yeah.
You know?
Like nonchalant.
Right. So I feel like you could take that and run with it, unfortunately, because that's just how.
Well, she didn't get too upset, so maybe it was not in that
the right moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
There would be other times, like a couple years ago, 2 to 4 years ago, where it's like my hand would be on your breast, or the intention was possibly more so there to try to spark something to happen.
Right. And I had to put a really firm boundary on that, especially when I got way over on the other extreme from the thing that happened a couple of years ago that I mentioned in the last episode. I had to tell Skylar, you are not allowed to touch anywhere around my nipples.
Yeah.
Because if I don't want to further what's going on, I'm going to be pissed. If you try that and it somehow makes me feel a certain way and I haven't wrapped my head around it, then I don't think that's very cool. But I didn't realize at the time that it was violating to me. Like I didn't have that vocabulary. I didn't have that word to express, you're violating me right now. But I also didn't know why I felt so on edge about it. So I just laid down this really hard boundary. And I think with that one, at that point, you did listen to that. You were like,
yep.
Well, okay, I'm not going to push this one.
And that's where the shift really started to happen was, a couple years ago. So I discussed in the last episode where my hand would be like nowhere near her anywhere. It would be like on her calf. And I just said, if you want to, then you need to initiate. And it was actually very confusing to me because at the same time, Jessie understood that there was a lack of desire for her. And she would say, but I need you to initiate because if you don't initiate, I'm not going to think about it.
Yes, I told him, do you understand how much pressure that puts me under? And I knew I wouldn't think of it. I knew I wouldn't.
And I'm at the same time thinking, but if I initiate it, I get turned down or I get in trouble.
It was hard. It was very hard.
But if I don't initiate, then you're feeling the guilt and bad and all this. So what the hell am I supposed to do? I'm damned if I do and I'm damned if I don't.
Yep. And I would think the same thing. I'm damned if I do and I'm damned if I don't.
And so then we started to understand what it meant to have those healthy boundaries. And so again, going back to the quote, respect is the bridge between healthy boundaries and meaningful connections. So then I established that the touch that I was going to give her, even though it looked very similar to the touch four plus years ago, it would actually really be very different.
Yes, he promised me, he said, I will rub your back and I will not be trying to get anything from you. I promise you this. And I decided to trust you.
Yeah. And you even said, if I trust you and you show me that you are really still trying, then that's going to be a breach of our trust. And I don't know that I can ever trust you again.
It's true. And I think it had to be that strong of a message because of the violating feeling that it would give me.
Without knowing exactly why.
Yeah, without knowing, which was so hard.
Because like we talked about in the first episode, there are couples where it's like, you can grab me whenever you want. You can pull yourself into me whenever you want. You can reach under my shirt whenever you want.
And that's fine if you are both consenting and have those boundaries put up, and that's where you guys are.
But obviously, we're doing this podcast, and the people that are reaching out, most of them don't have those boundaries.
Right, exactly.
Most people in these allo-ace relationships, there's going to be a discrepancy when it comes to what each other considers intimacy and what that touch looks like and feels like.
Right.
So you really have to establish those healthy boundaries. You have to respect them. And I will say, like, an allosexual person can say, well, my boundary is that I want sex. That's not a boundary. A boundary is something that is limiting something else. So I put a fence up in my yard because I want to keep my neighbor's dogs out. It's not, I'm building a fence so that I can take over my neighbor's property and I'm building it on their property. Now
you could have, a deal breaker is different than a boundary.
A deal breaker is different than a boundary.
Yes, you could have a deal breaker where you say there needs to be sex or amount.
But these are essentially, these are the tools or the tactics that you need to use in order to recreate healthy boundaries and healthy consensual touch in your marriage.
Fresh, new understandings of how you define intimacy and what your boundaries are. What do those look like?
And I want to paint a picture, if you will, on what happens almost nightly.
Yes, and we don't want to make anyone uncomfortable because what's interesting with this is that it's completely not sexual.
But if someone were to see it, they would probably think it was.
They'd probably think something's about to happen or something just happened.
So we both sleep in our underwear. And Jesse, though, does not typically sleep with the top on.
Yep.
Oftentimes we are spooning.
Mm-hmm.
And I am touching all over the backside of her. My hand will go down her underwear. This is all consensual, mind you. It'll
down
go
my underwear in the back.
In the back. And I will rub her butt. I will scratch my nails up the butt cheek. I will even like swoop over the hip bone and tickle there. I will slide my hand up and down her rib cage area. It'll go in front to her stomach. It never goes in the pubic area where that's all happening. And it'll even go around the nipple area and around the chest area. My hand will go into her hair with like my fingertips. I will rub and massage her back. I will like grip her shoulder. All of that, if you were just hearing that, you'd be like, well, that's foreplay. But it's not.
It's not.
Now, as I said in the last episode, my body might react because I'm touching your body. But my intention for doing this isn't to turn you on whatsoever.
No.
And
it's just physical touch.
It's physical
non-sexual
touch.
Physical touch.
And it's also safe touch for Jessie. Because her healthy boundary is that I can do these things as long as it's not with the intention to try and turn her on.
Right.
Because I could turn her on. We know how that happens.
My body responds. Okay, so my body responds, but it doesn't mean mentally I'm wanting that.
And we do understand that there are asexual people in an allo-ace relationship, and there's even potentially allosexual people in the relationship that for traumatic reasons, autism reasons, or any other reason that they don't like touch.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So we're not insinuating or encouraging that you should and have to touch.
No, we're just explaining the lengths at which if you define intimacy and create boundaries properly, then you can get so much more out of your closeness and connection. And that the thing is like you can feel close making food in the kitchen. It doesn't have to mean that your partner is in bed half naked and you get to touch their body. No, I just happen to be okay with that. I happen to be very happy with that, actually.
Even though she is sex averse,
it doesn't feel sexual at all.
It doesn't
so
feel
I'm not
sexual.
averse to that.
So the thing about this is you and I can hear the allosexual people saying, well, that just seems like torture.
Right. I was just going to say, Skylar, what does that leave you feeling like?
It's actually quite interesting.
Ooh.
I think Jesse knows this. In the past, there have been times where I'm like, I need to go like take care of myself.
You don't even say that though. You just say, I'm going to go to the bathroom.
And then when I get back, she's like, you were gone forever. Where were you?
It's like I'm almost blind to it. Like,
yeah,
I've gotten to a point where I don't even, there's no accusing of any sort or anything.
Yeah. And it's certainly not even like a fraction of the time. Like it really isn't torturous for me to do this. It's more so like this is fulfilling a intimate thing for me, because all the touch that I'm doing, the having my body close to you, literally like being in a position, if you will, that would almost relate to that. Touching you, you enjoying me giving you this safe touch and my ability to, provide something that you really enjoy, and that I also get that human connection on an intimate level with my partner, and that there's not a lack of touch on my end. But
wouldn't you say the biggest thing to that actually is, without a shadow of a doubt, that I trust you completely?
Yes.
Yeah, that actually brings that closeness and that feeling.
And this has started like a long time ago. Like we said, a couple years ago.
Right.
And the fact of the matter is that even during that time, Jessie did have her persona. And so as that persona went away and she did come out as asexual, and understanding that she is sex averse, the level in which we do have sex has dropped dramatically from what it was during your persona.
Yes, 100%.
And so one would probably think, well, then you're probably more frustrated than you were before she came out as asexual. And the answer is I'm not. I'm actually less frustrated, quote unquote, than I was before. Because I now have an understanding of what is healthy boundaries for her when it comes to asexuality and what that looks like. And I respect that.
Right.
So I'm able to establish touch that is safe. I'm able to disconnect sex from intimacy. Now, not completely, because I don't think that I view sex as just sex. And I certainly know that you don't, because it is like for you, the ultimate closeness, intimacy is sex.
Exactly. Yes. I feel like if as a sex averse asexual, I feel like if I'm having that feeling of wanting to be as close with you as possible. It is fleeting, I'll be honest. But that means everything to me. When that feeling comes up, it's not a feeling of wanting sex. It's a feeling of wanting the craziest amount of closeness that I can get. And like I said, it is fleeting. But when it does happen, it feels like just togetherness. So I get that. I get that part of it. I just don't think, I think you're doing a disservice to yourself if you are connecting intimacy with only sex.
Yes. Or that sex is the largest and best way for you to be intimate with your partner.
Yeah. I would say, and just to clarify here, I would say that I get that feeling of wanting that closeness. Gosh, maybe twice a year. I don't know. And when in the other times when I do feel like doing something physical, it's because my body is telling me that I should be procreating pretty much. I'm talking about ovulation here. And even then, I have to wrap my head around it for days. It usually starts, a few days before, and I have to think probably 30 different times during that day. Okay, do I want to do this today? Do I want to do this today? And then that lasts a few days of me questioning that over and over and over again in my head. And then finally it's like, okay, I can do this.
Or it passes and you're like, oh, well.
Yeah, or I miss the window because it's so short-lived where my body is feeling that way. So my mind just is not there at all.
And I'm pretty much ready to go whenever.
Right.
So it's not, so again, we talked about this in the last episode. It isn't that I'm not a sexual person. I take care of myself at least 7 times a week.
Right. And you should be intimate with yourself in that way, unless you're uncomfortable with it, of course.
Yes. And so we just want, just to be clear, the recommendation that I am giving for an allosexual that is in a relationship where there has been this negativity in your marriage from possibly both ends is to start over and set those boundaries and try to learn if you can separate intimacy from the act of sex. And then you can look at what is it from the act of sex that I am getting. Because if I have ultimately separated the act of sex from the expectation when it comes to intimacy, then what is left? Like it feeling good, an orgasm, and dopamine release. And those are all things that, not all things, but at least 2 of the 3 I can get from myself. It feeling better, sure. Sex does feel better than my hand. And we've had that conversation before as well.
Right, but you shouldn't be relying on somebody else
for that.
Because you can't do that, really.
And so if you can get to a point where you can establish for yourself of why you're tying so much into the act of sex, into intimacy, if you can separate that, then you might be able to get into a much healthier place in your relationship. And like we said, there are deal breakers for people. Not everyone's going to be able to get to that level.
And if it is a deal breaker, I'm here to say that they are not the right person for you if that is a deal breaker.
Especially if ethical non-monogamy is not an option.
And it doesn't have to be an option. Just because you are asexual does not mean that you are going to be totally on board with ethical non-monogamy. It can be great for some people, but you should not force yourself into something that you are not comfortable with. And Skylar gave that advice to the allosexuals out there, right? My bit of advice to the asexuals out there is to be as honest and kind
Yeah.
as possible. Do not be as transparent as you possibly can when defining what intimacy is to you and what your boundaries are, because then you have laid it out there. And if something does happen where things don't work out, you know that you made it very clear in a loving, kind way.
And that's one thing that I posted the other day was it is just as important for an asexual to say the things that they're not willing to do as much as it is to say the things that they are willing to do.
Yes, we have so much focus on the negative or what feels like the negative, but there is so much positive that can be had.
Because if the only thing that you hear are the things that your partner is not wanting to do or willing to do, then the only thing that you're hearing is no, 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 no. There's nowhere in there that you're hearing the yeses. So an example would be, I don't want you to put your hand down the front of my underwear, but I do want you to put it on the front of my chest.
Yeah, or on the back of my shoulders.
So by just saying, I don't want you to touch me below the waist, and I don't want to make out with you with tongue, and I don't want you to do this or that, you're not hearing all the other options that are the yeses.
You could even say, I don't want you to touch me down the front of my pants, but I would love it if you would touch my shoulders.
Yes.
Yes, phrase it like that. Own that and be positive that is an amazing thing to be saying. Please touch me here, though.
Or I don't want to have you put your tongue in my mouth, but I do want to have a more intimate makeout for 20 seconds.
Now, do we have any examples to give that don't involve touching like that in that way?
How about if a partner asked another partner, like, hey, can we, I miss being around you. Can we watch Netflix and cuddle?
Right. And if you are not up for that, because guess what? Not everyone wants to be touched, and that's completely fine. Then you could suggest something else where you are still spending alone time together that means something. Like, hey, we should pick a dessert out from a recipe online, and we should go to the store and spend alone time in the kitchen together.
And so while it may not be the same level in the original request, it still is spending time together, which was what you pointed out was, I miss spending some time with you.
Yeah, I'd like some alone time with you.
So now it's like, well, I don't really want to watch a show and cuddle, but what if we cook something together?
Right. So lean on that and look at the positives of still having that intentional alone time that means something. And you know what? Sometimes you might not want to do anything like that at all. And in those situations, I think it's really important to be honest and say, right now, I just need some alone time. I love you. And I would love to do something that's alone with you later on.
And you can even say to that, check in with me tomorrow, or check in with me in 2 hours to see where I'm at with that.
Right.
Don't just let it be a open-ended thing of where they're guessing. Similar to like, your kids requesting for batteries for the last week and a half.
Yeah.
You said you were going to get batteries. I will.
Yeah, or you just say, I got to think about it or something, and it just keeps going and going and going. No. Like, I think it's important to be intentional with saying, make a clear agreement to a degree, even if that means, hey, can you check in with me after we eat dinner with this? I'd love to check in then. And
I will say that another thing that you can utilize during the times when the person who has maybe the more strict boundaries when it comes to sexual natures, you can use this information to possibly even help navigate those situations. So with Jessie, for instance, when she does occasionally say, we should have sex.
Yeah, I'm very... Are you getting at the fact that I'm very direct about it?
Yes. But what is my first response every time?
Your response is getting clarification. So do you want to do anything on top of the sex? Do you want anything as well as the sex?
Do you want the whole package, or do you just want the main course?
Right. Something I want
Or does the main course not exist? Are you only wanting an appetizer? Like, what exactly does that mean? When you say you want sex, what does that mean? Because I want to respect your healthy boundary when it comes to that particular act.
Right. And you don't want to assume that I'm okay with you doing A, B, C, and D when I'm really just only needing E.
And that's because there has been assumptions in the past.
Right.
So
right.
There was a time when Jessie was like, hey, I want you to do some oral stuff. And I took that as that's the beginning, but sex is the ending. And you hadn't wrapped your head around it, and you were just like,
oh,
I didn't know that we were going to do that.
But okay. And then didn't I just do it anyway?
Yeah.
I did. Yeah.
And you were like, normally you ask if it's continuing, and this time you didn't. That was because I had assumed, because every time before that it's always happened. So I'm like, yeah, it's going to happen.
Yeah, assuming is not a good idea.
No. So now I just make sure that the boundaries are 100% there, and that I know them so that I can respect them.
Yeah. Do you know what's really, really, really attractive? Is knowing actually where your partner's at and what's actually wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah. Something I wanted to point out that I think is interesting is, speaking on consent, there was a time, we just said I'm very direct. If I am going to say we should have sex, I just say we should have sex. But there was a time where Skylar said, can you say something even more direct, like, I'd like to have sex? I couldn't even say that because it didn't feel genuine to say I'd like to have sex. It's more like when I'm saying we should have sex, it's more like me saying I am okay to have sex right now. I am in a healthy place in my head to be able to give this to you.
And we had to establish that because I really, like I said, consent is very important. And so for me, I didn't want her to feel bad, like, oh, it's been 3 weeks or it's been a while, so we probably should. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to make sure that when she was saying that she wanted to have sex, that she was really meaning that she wanted to have sex, that it wasn't because she felt bad. But the issue with that is that if I don't believe her, then she's not going to be very happy either. No,
and trust is everything here. And the other thing, I don't know if other asexuals can relate to this. Obviously, I'm sex averse, but I have a hard time in being enthusiastically consenting. Like that doesn't ring true to me. I don't know how to be enthusiastic with it. To me, it's like, okay, yes. It's not like, yeah, get on me, baby. No, it's just like, yes. And so for me, for a bit, that was confusing because it was like, well, I'm not enthusiastic. I'm in a good place mentally. I've prepared myself and I am ready to do this now.
Yeah. And the other part of this too is that consent can change at any moment.
Yes, at any moment.
So just because Jessie says yes doesn't mean that immediately after she can't say no.
And you should feel comfortable to know that you can, in fact, say no after you have said yes.
And if you get to that point where you are respecting the healthy boundaries that your partner has set, then them saying yes and then turning around and saying no will not be a disappointment.
Yeah, that's a big thing as well.
Because you really have to fully respect and have their mental health and their healthy boundaries at the forefront of like your mind and part of what you're providing as a loving partner.
Right. And so if that means, responding when they have changed their mind and saying no, if that means, making sure you say, "Okay, I love you." Like, make sure you respond in a positive way, because it's very easy to feel so much pressure and feel so bad.
And you can also, the thing about consent as well, especially when it comes to like an act with sex, again, it needs to go back to the yeses versus the nos. Okay, you changed your mind with sex. Is there anything else that you would rather do instead? I want you to hold me. Or
let's watch our favorite show.
Let's watch our favorite show. Like, don't separate the connection that you were going to have completely. Try to find a way to still have some sort of connection, as long as everybody is consenting to some form of connection or touch or cuddling or togetherness.
Just enjoying something together. It doesn't even have to be, sexual in nature at all.
Yeah.
Watch your favorite show together. Listen to some of your favorite music and just lay there.
And we understand that there is a lot tied to a lot of allosexuals when it comes to their partner desiring them sexually. There are so many allosexual people that are feeling really bad about themselves, feeling that they are disgusting, that they are ugly, that they are unwanted because their partner doesn't sexually desire them.
I want to say something to that.
Yes.
Okay, so your partner might not sexually desire you. Well, it's likely that they don't if they identify with being asexual. But they desire everything else about you, or so many other things about you. They are so into all of your little quirks. They're so into the way that you respond to this or that. They're into all of these other things about you. They desire you in all these other ways.
Or if they don't currently, because of a past of a negative relationship based on a lack, then it is something that you could potentially get back to and find the reasons why you first fell in love in the first place.
Exactly. Yep.
Because you can say, well, that's great for you guys, but my spouse or my partner, they don't like the quirks. They don't respect and like me. They don't want to be around me.
I think that's being masked by the sadness that has taken over because of the harm that's been done and the toxicness that has happened between you two. Because you did
some point
fall in love for some reason at some point, And if I had to take a wild guess here from my own experience, from the asexual side, this doesn't apply to everyone probably, but the asexual that fell in love with you for so many different reasons.
They probably weren't sexually attracted to you to begin with, but there was other things that drew you to them.
Right, exactly.
And so can you continue to grow and find and get to that place where you also can find the reasons why you fell in love with them that didn't involve sex?
Right. We thought that we might end up covering 2 topics tonight, but clearly boundaries has been incredibly important and there's been a lot to talk about here. So we look forward to our next episode where we plan on talking about our biggest fears being in this relationship. We have so many ideas for so many different episodes, and we're so excited to talk to everyone about this and with each other too.
And obviously, these don't apply to everybody. Not everything that we mentioned in this episode is going to do something for everyone. But the hope is that, like we said, people will listen to it with an open heart and open mind and use maybe something that we said to try to establish intimacy again in your relationship in a healthy way.
Right.
Using that respect.
Start building that connection again if it's been lost.
And the hurt that some people are feeling is valid. And there are things that are certainly deal breakers. And only you can decide what those are. But if you're willing to try, if you're willing to open up to your partner on both sides of the aisle, you might be able to find that bridge of respect, which will lead those healthy boundaries into those meaningful connections.
Right. And only you can take ownership of the things that you have said or done. And that goes for both parties as well. So
thanks for listening.
We completely and totally love all of you. We love your messages. Please keep sending them. And we'll see you over on whatever platform you choose to connect with us on.
And neither one of us is rooting for one particular side.
That's true.
So I hope that you will know that if you reach out to us, we're going to listen to both sides and we're going to communicate with what works for us. And we will do these episodes, authentically with the information that we have with our own experiences.
Yes. And on all of these platforms, when you do reach out to us, we both have access to the messages coming in. So we can both offer our perspective and what we're thinking about it. So we encourage it. We appreciate it.
Please reach out. Please let us know what resonated with you. Please, if you can get to a point, listen to these with your partners so that you can have that dialogue and that open communication with them, if that's something that interests you. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.